Welcome back to Investing Talk Podcast. Today we're looking at Oxford Lane Capital,
Oh, yeah.
ticker symbol OXLC,
Okay.
a company that's been making some interesting moves lately in the world of collateralized loan obligations, or CLOs.
Yeah, CLOs are basically bundles of loans that are made to companies.
Right.
Kind of like think of it as a diversified portfolio
Yeah.
of corporate debt.
And I know CLOs might sound kind of complex,
Right.
but stick with us because this is where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
Oxford Lane Capital focuses on the higher yield,
Yeah.
potentially riskier slices of these CLO bundles.
That's right. They're focused on CLO equity, which is where the potential for big returns is, but also
Yeah.
a lot of risk.
And recently, there's been a lot of buzz around OXLC,
Yeah.
from financial results and dividend announcements to market fluctuations and even some insider buying. It's currently trading above its short and medium-term moving averages,
Yeah.
but below its long-term average. So there's definitely a story unfolding here.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like a puzzle we need to piece together, especially for those of us who are always on the lookout for income-generating investments.
Yeah.
We're going to break down OXLC's recent performance, their position in the CLO market.
Oh, yeah.
See if this could be a stock worth adding to your portfolio.
Sounds good. Let's start with the recent performance.
Oh.
OXLC has actually been seeing some positive movement.
Oh, that's good.
Their NAV, or net asset value per share, has been increasing. It reached $4.90 in Q4 2024 and $4.82 in Q3 2025.
And here's another interesting point. Their total investment income is also up.
Hmm.
It hit $82.6 million in Q4 2024. What does this tell us?
Well, a rising NAV is usually a good sign.
Okay.
It means that the underlying assets in those CLOs are performing well, which means the investment is backed by something solid.
Got it.
The growing investment income is also encouraging because it suggests potential for increased dividends and returns for investors.
That sounds promising, but I have to bring up that OXLC missed earnings expectations for Q3 2025.
Oh,
They reported 26 cents EPS against an expected 67 cents. How should we interpret that?
yeah, you're right. An earnings miss is never ideal.
Right.
But it's important to look at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
One quarter doesn't tell the whole story.
Sure.
OXLC has been delivering solid results overall, and this could just be a temporary blip.
Okay.
Investors shouldn't overreact to a single quarter's performance.
Yeah. So let's shift our focus to the CLO market, because
Yeah.
that's OXLC's bread and butter.
Yeah.
We know they invested $225.2 million in CLOs in Q4 2024 and traded over $300 million worth in the secondary market.
Wow.
Plus, they've been benefiting from the increasing trend of CLO issuance and refinancing. What does all this activity mean for OXLC?
This is a crucial point for anyone looking for strong yields. CLOs can offer significantly higher yields than more traditional fixed income investments.
Interesting.
OXLC's active involvement in this market puts them in a good spot to capture those yields. And get this, their CLO equity investments are currently yielding 23.9%.
23.9%.
Yeah.
That's an impressive number, especially when you consider the possibility of lower interest rates in the future.
Yeah.
And while we're on the topic of yields, let's talk about those dividends.
Yeah, okay.
OXLC is known for having a pretty attractive dividend yield.
Absolutely. This is where things get really exciting for income-focused investors.
Yeah.
They're currently offering a 19.49% dividend yield, with projections suggesting it could reach 21.09% over the next 12 months.
And they haven't just maintained those dividends. They actually increased their monthly distributions by 12.5% to 9 cents per share back in Q3 2024.
Wow.
For investors seeking consistent income, that's a pretty big deal.
It definitely is. Those regular and growing payouts could make a significant difference in an income-focused portfolio.
Yeah.
So when we consider those attractive dividends and the company's overall performance, is OXLC looking like a good investment opportunity?
Well, there are certainly some compelling arguments for investing in OXLC.
Okay.
Some analysts believe it's currently undervalued with a target price of $5.75. That represents a 13.19% upside potential.
Okay.
And their total return since April 2024 has been strong at 18.5%, beating the S&P 500.
Wow.
Plus, we can't forget about that insider buying, which could be a signal of confidence in the company's future.
All good points.
Right.
But we have to acknowledge the potential downsides as well.
Sure.
For example, there was 17.3 $7 million in net unrealized appreciation on investments.
Okay.
That's something to consider even if it's just a paper loss for now.
Right.
And the market sentiment around OXLC is currently bearish with a fear and greed index reading of 39.
So even though the company's individual performance indicators look positive, there's a sense of anxiety surrounding the stock.
Yeah.
It's like a tug-of-war between company-specific positives and broader market concerns. Where do we go from here to get a clear picture?
This is where we can turn to technical analysis for additional clues.
Okay.
It can help us decipher the market signals and make sense of those mixed messages.
Looking at the technical indicators, it's like we're getting mixed signals. On one hand, OXLC is currently trading above its 5, 20, 50, and 100-day moving averages.
Yeah.
Those are typically seen as good signs, right?
Yes, those short-term trends suggest some positive momentum.
Okay.
However, we can't ignore the longer-term indicators.
Right.
OXLC is trading below its 200-day moving average, which could point to a potential long-term downward trend.
Got it.
And the RSI, or Relative Strength Index, is currently in neutral territory but leaning toward overbought conditions.
So potentially overbought, even with the short-term positive signals? What about the other indicators?
The MACD, which measures momentum, is indicating weak bullish momentum. And another thing to consider is that the stock is currently trading close to the upper Bollinger Band, which could be another signal that it's slightly overbought in the short term.
We've got positive short-term trends and longer-term indicators flashing some warning signs.
Yeah.
It's a lot to unpack. How do we make sense of all this?
It's like trying to solve a puzzle where some pieces fit perfectly and others seem to be from a different box altogether.
Right.
But by carefully analyzing the overall picture and weighing the evidence, we can arrive at a more informed perspective.
Okay.
So let's dive in. In this case, while those short-term trends look promising, I'd say the longer-term indicators suggest a bit of caution is warranted.
So maybe not a full speed ahead buy signal, but not a run for the hills situation either?
Exactly. I'd lean towards a hold recommendation, but with a slight bullish bias given the current information.
Okay.
Keep a close eye on those key support and resistance levels.
Right.
They're at $5.06 for support and $5.14 for resistance. Watching how the stock behaves around those levels could give valuable clues about its future direction.
That makes sense. It sounds like OXLC could be a good fit for someone comfortable with a bit of risk, especially if they're drawn to those high dividends.
Yeah.
But it's not a set it and forget it kind of stock.
Yeah.
Investors need to stay informed and be ready to adapt to changing market conditions.
Absolutely. The key takeaway here is that investing requires careful consideration of all the available information, both fundamental and technical.
Right.
And it's always a good idea to do your own research and consult with a financial advisor before making any investment decisions.
Speaking of making decisions, we've talked a lot about Oxford Lane Capital, ticker symbol OXLC.
Yeah.
We've dug into their financials, their position in the CLO market, those tempting dividends, and even the technical indicators. Now, for the question on everyone's mind, would we invest?
Let's start with you. What are your initial thoughts?
Well, full disclosure, I tend to be a bit cautious when a stock has a bearish sentiment attached to it, even if the company itself seems to be performing well. That fear and greed index reading of 39 definitely gives me pause.
I understand that hesitation market sentiment can be a powerful force. It's wise not to disregard it entirely.
But on the flip side, that 23.9% yield on OXLC's CLO equity investments is hard to ignore.
Right.
Plus, their commitment to increasing those monthly distributions definitely speaks to my inner income investor.
Those are valid points. The potential for high yield is certainly there. And OXLC's track record of increasing those dividends is very appealing for income-focused investors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for me, it comes down to risk tolerance.
Okay.
I'm not super comfortable with high-risk investments, so I'd probably approach OXLC with a smaller allocation, maybe as part of a well-diversified portfolio. What about you? Would you invest in OXLC?
It's a tough call, but I'm leaning slightly towards yes with a big caveat. I would only consider investing if I were comfortable with a higher level of risk. The CLO market can be quite volatile, and we've already seen some mixed signals from the technical analysis.
It makes sense. It's definitely not a stock for the faint of heart.
Right. But here's what I find really interesting. The potential for growth in the CLO market itself.
Oh, okay.
It's a relatively new asset class that's gaining in popularity, especially as investors search for higher yields in a low interest rate environment.
Interesting.
If Oxford Lane Capital can continue to capitalize on this trend, there could be significant upside potential.
I see your point. Investing in OXLC is almost like placing a bet on the future of the CLO market itself.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to pay attention to how the company navigates potential interest rate changes and the overall market sentiment.
Right.
Their upcoming earnings reports and any announcements regarding their CLO investments will be crucial to watch.
So for our listeners, it seems we're both cautiously optimistic about OXLC. It could be a good fit for income-focused investors who are comfortable with some risk and who believe in the long-term potential of the CLO market.
Exactly. As always, we encourage you to do your own research and consider your own financial goals and risk tolerance before making any investment decisions.
Right.
What stands out to you as the biggest potential reward with OXLC?
For me, it's those attractive dividends.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in generating passive income, and OXLC's commitment to increasing those monthly distributions is really appealing. What about you? What's the biggest risk you see?
The biggest risk, in my opinion, is the potential for volatility in the CLO market. These investments are inherently complex and can be affected by many factors, including interest rates, economic conditions, and even global events.
So for someone considering investing in OXLC, what are the key things they should be monitoring?
First and foremost, pay close attention to their earnings reports and any announcements related to their CLO portfolio. Look for signs of strong performance, continued growth in NAV, and any changes to their dividend policy.
Right. And it's not just about OXLC itself. It's important to stay informed about the broader CLO market as well. Are there any specific indicators or trends our listeners should be watching?
Definitely keep an eye on interest rate movements and the overall economic outlook. Changes in interest rates can significantly impact the performance of CLOs, and any signs of economic weakness could increase the risk of defaults within those loan portfolios.
And let's not forget about market sentiment. That fear and greed index reading of 39 is a reminder that investor perception can have a real impact on stock prices.
Absolutely. Monitor how market sentiment toward OXLC evolves over time. Look for news articles, analyst reports, and even social media discussions to gauge the overall sentiment surrounding the stock.
It seems like investing in OXLC is a bit like riding a roller coaster. There's potential for excitement and big rewards, but you also need to be prepared for some bumps along the way.
That's a great analogy. It's not a passive investment. It requires active monitoring and a willingness to adjust your strategy as needed.
Well said. We've given our listeners a lot to think about. What are your final thoughts on Oxford Lane Capital?
For income-focused investors comfortable with a higher level of risk and who believe in the growth potential of the CLO market, OXLC could be a compelling addition to a diversified portfolio.
However, it's essential to do your own research, carefully weigh the potential rewards against the risks, and monitor the company's performance closely.
We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yes.
Would you invest in OXLC, and why or why not?
Before we wrap up, I'd love to get your take on something.
Sure, what's on your mind?
Well, we've been discussing Oxford Lane Capital and the potential of CLOs, but it raises a bigger question about how we invest these days.
Oh, okay.
With interest rates constantly changing and traditional fixed income investments not offering the yields they used to, are alternative investments like CLOs becoming more appealing, even for folks who might have considered them too risky in the past.
That's a great point. It's like the whole investment landscape is shifting, and we need to adapt our strategies.
Right? We can't just rely on the same old approaches. Investors need to be open to new possibilities, even if it means stepping outside their comfort zones a bit.
And that's where education and research become absolutely critical. You really need to understand the ins and outs of an investment, particularly something as complex as CLOs, before diving in.
Couldn't agree more. Informed decisions that align with your financial goals and risk tolerance. That's what it's all about.
Well said. So to our listeners who are intrigued by Oxford Lane Capital and this whole world of CLOs, I encourage you to explore further, do your own research, and see if this type of investment might be right for you.
Remember, the world of investing is constantly changing. Stay curious, stay informed, and never stop learning.
That's fantastic advice.
Thanks for joining us today on Investing Talk Podcast for this look at Oxford Lane Capital. We hope you found it informative.
It's been a pleasure sharing these insights.
And as always, we appreciate you tuning in to Investing Talk Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, share this episode with your friends, and leave us a comment. We'll see you next time for another exciting episode.